and we still have some ground to cover on automation. We left off talking about 3 automation tools that can be kicked off by any object. So our workflow rules, our process builder, approval process, and now we're going to shift gears a little bit, still talking about automation, but this time talking about automation that cannot be applied to any object. It's what I call object-specific tools, can only be applied to certain objects. So starting off with 3 tools that can be applied or can be used by cases and leads for this first slide. First, what happens is we have web to case or web to lead. What this does is it allows you to create a form and host it on your website, and then people can enter information on the form, and from what is entered, it can automate the creation of a case or a lead record in your system, web to case or web to lead. And it's quite possible that you filled out one of these forms as a consumer. Maybe you didn't know it was creating that case or creating that lead, but maybe you had an issue and you had to contact customer service, so you filled out a quick form. Could have created a case for you. Maybe you found a company and you wanted to learn more information about them, so you filled out a quick form, could have created a lead. You get 5,000 cases per day. We'll do 5K for 5,000 cases per day with web to case. And you get 500 leads today. Hopefully you get 500 leads today. 500 leads per day with web to lead. So that's what happens first, web to case or web to lead. What happens next is you have an assignment rule that runs to route the incoming lead or incoming case to the user or the queue that you specify. So can go to a user, can also go to a queue. We haven't talked about queues yet. You may be familiar with them. They're kind of like holding tanks, and queues can own records of certain objects. So leads, cases, tasks, objects that can be owned by queues or common ones that can be owned by queues. And then users who are members of that queue or above them in the hierarchy are free to accept work from the queue. When you have an assignment rule, you actually only get 1 active assignment rule for leads, 1 active assignment rule for cases. And this is, or the way that these leads or cases are routed is determined with different rule entries that you specify. So it's basically lines of criteria that says if it's this, then route it here. If it's this, then route it here. Again, to users and to queues. Third, what happens is you have an auto response rule that sends an automatic email response to the lead or case submitter. So maybe it's an email alert that says, we've received your information. Someone from our sales team will reach out. Maybe it's an email that says, hey, we're so sorry you're running into trouble. Someone will look into your issue. So assignment rules route the leads or cases within Salesforce. Auto response rules respond to someone outside of Salesforce, the lead or case submitter. So let's talk about assignment rules and auto response rules a little bit more. We talked about queues. They're kind of like holding tanks. They can own records, and users who are members of the queue are able to grab records from the queues. These assignment rules route those incoming leads or cases based on rule criteria entries that you set. Now, you should note you only get 1 active assignment rule for leads, 1 active assignment rule for cases. So only 1 can be active for each object at any point. In this example, we have a lead assignment rule that says, okay, if the source is web, we're going to route it to a web promo queue. If the source is trade show, we're going to route it to a user, to Matt Wilson. If none of those apply, we need to set up a default lead owner. This person is kind of our backup, but we need to send it to someone if none of the rule entries apply. Now, when you add these rule entries, a really important piece of this is you specify the sort order. So this is sort order 1 is the source web. This is source order 2 is the source trade show. The sort order is going to tell Salesforce what to evaluate first. If it's 1, it gets evaluated first. If it's 2, it gets evaluated second. And as soon as one rule entry is met, as soon as that criteria is met, shoot, it gets sent off. So it doesn't kind of weigh it out if there's a conflict. As soon as one is met, it gets sent off. And this is something I was working with recently in my org as well. I added a rule entry. I tested it, as we all should as admins, and it didn't get routed where I thought it would. Well, there are a lot of other rule entries above that one in the sort order, and one of those had met the criteria, so it got sent off before the one that I had added. So these rules apply to leads and cases that come in with web to lead or web to case, like we saw on the last slide. Or if you manually create a lead or case, there's an option you can add to the modal when you're creating that record that asks to route with an assignment rule. So as long as that's checked, it does apply there as well. Now in this particular example, because we're only looking at our source field, and because source is a single select pick list, it doesn't really matter what our sort order is. There's never going to be a conflict here. But in some situations, there might be a conflict, like in the example I ran into. So let me go to my lead assignment rule that I have here, and I'll show you when we might have a conflict. I have a lead assignment rule, leads by region. So if the region is US, goes to the US sales team. If it's EMEA, goes to the EMEA sales team, APAC to APAC. If it's null, we're sending it to a user, to Courtney Brown. And then I added this one recently. This is my order, my sort order 5. Industry equals banking. If the industry is banking, we're sending it to Allison Wheeler. But what if we have a conflict? What if the region is EMEA and the industry is banking? Well, if it's EMEA and this criteria is met, it's never going to get evaluated by this rule entry. Like my example, mine I actually had, it was probably sort order 100 or something, because we have a lot more in our lead assignment rule, our case assignment rule, I think it was. In this case, it's never going to make it here. If it's EMEA and it's banking, it never gets to this rule entry. So if I want to prioritize routing it to Allison before it goes to the EMEA sales team, that's when I would need to reorder this. And it needs to be higher up on the list, which means it needs to have a lower sort order if I want to prioritize routing it to Allison before the EMEA sales team. So I always like to point that out in my org, because in this example, sort order doesn't matter. There's not going to be a conflict here. But when you have many rule entries, like you often do in real life, that's where sort order can matter, where it can make a difference in how it's routed. So first we have assignment rules. Then we have our auto response rules. This is what is sent to the lead or case submitter, our auto response rules. Think about if you ever make a purchase online or you submit that form like we talked about, you want some kind of confirmation that they got your information, that they got your form you submitted. You want the email saying, thanks, we got your order. Or if thanks for sending your information, someone will reach out to you. We want some kind of confirmation, and we want to provide that to our customers. That's what we're doing with an auto response rule. Now, similar to assignment rules, you get one active auto response rule for leads, one active auto response rule for cases. Again, just one active for each object at a time. These auto response rules are set up in a very similar way to the assignment rules. The click path is very similar. I set my sort order. Sort order 1 is the source web. If so, instead of telling it how to route our lead or case, this is telling us what kind of response we want to send. So this allows us to send targeted responses based on criteria. If the source is web, send them a special web promo email. Sort order 2, if the source is trade show, send them a trade show email. So this can be a bit more personalized. If none of these apply, we can send a default email template. We still want to send them a response, but maybe it's not anything as specific. It's just kind of generic. Maybe the trade show email says something along the lines of, hey, it was so nice to meet you at the trade show last week. Thanks for stopping by our booth. But the default email template just says, hey, we received your information. Someone from our team will reach out to you. So it allows you to send those targeted responses or specify the default email template, which is kind of your generic response. We talked about email alerts with workflow rules and with process builder. And those email alerts are ones that don't get stored as activity history on the record. Email alerts don't get stored as activity history on the record. These auto response rules, on the other hand, do. So if someone submits a lead, they get an auto response rule. I go look at the activity history on the lead. That email that came from the auto response rule will show up there. So nice way to keep track of that activity, that touch point with the customer. Okay, those were 3 tools that apply to leads and cases. Web 2, leader case assignment rules, leader case auto response rules, in that order. Next, escalation rules apply to cases only to cases. An escalation